Well, good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. I'm happy that you decided to join us today. Today we're going to we're going to begin with the end in mind, and we're going to walk through how you report the results of the Soliman calculators in your reports. I've got a screen up here that talks about remaining economic life, which is, the basis. That's the theory behind the calculations that we do. I'll just go through these very briefly. That's been a big part of our other webinars, and you can always look right here at solimanappraisal.com under remaining economic life. So built into the 1004 and the other residential forms is the fact that economic life minus effective age is the remaining economic life, okay? So if economic life is 60, which is assumed in the cost data that we license, I know that there are other people that like to extract that from the market, but we just use 60, and you can account for that, which we'll talk about later. But if effective age is 15, remaining life is 45, and the percentage of depreciation is 25%. 15 divided by 60 is 25%. And the market reaction to the house, the amount that people pay for the improvements, is 75% of the cost, okay? So if a bathroom costs $10,000 and the market's paying 75% of cost, a good place to start for a bath adjustment might be $7,500. So the calculations are simple, but there's many of them. It's good to have a calculator set up to do this, a spreadsheet type of a thing. So that's why we wrote Soliman. Some more definitions. Remaining economic life, it's the estimated period over which existing improvements are expected to continue to contribute economically to property. So it's different than remaining physical life. A small house with 2 bedrooms and 1 bath and 1 garage stall on a large lot might be in perfect condition. It might have just been renovated, but it fails to contribute economically to the property if people are buying houses like that and tearing them down to build 4-bedroom, 4 garage stall, 4 bathroom dream homes, right? Because it happens to be in the right neighborhood. And we've got a neighborhood like that in my market. I'm sure you've seen those too. It's called gentrification, okay? In the Dictionary of Real Estate Appraisal, economic life is the estimated period over which existing improvements are expected to contribute economically, again, not physically, to a property. So you'll see things happen in the commercial realm, like we saw in Minneapolis, where the Metrodome was the ultimate stadium when it was built back in the 80s. It had a roof that was suspended by air, and it was all concrete, and it was built to a budget. It wasn't very attractive, really, but within 25, 30 years, they tore it down because the economics of having Major League Baseball and Major League Football had changed to the extent that, in fact, baseball actually moved out of it, but football needed more suites, more restrooms, more of a game experience, so it failed to contribute economically, and it was torn down. It wasn't worn out, it was torn down because of the economics. Same thing can happen with houses. So again, here's the economic life values assumed in the cost data. The reason I like to use these is because cost data, believe it or not, is market-based. The people that compile cost data look at the market and they see not only how much it costs to build houses, but how long they tend to last. So I think that's a good place to start. And again, you can work around that if you would like. And then just briefly, depreciation, it's a loss in property value from any cause, and it's the difference on a particular day, on the effective date, of what the market would pay for those improvements and what they would cost on the same date. So we're not looking at historical cost, we're looking at today's cost. And then this is a big one at the end here. This is on page 599 of the Appraisal of Real Estate. Whenever we apply the concepts of economic life, effective age, and remaining life, the appraiser considers all elements of depreciation in one calculation. So it's physical, it's functional, it's external, and that's all put into the calculation of of depreciation. So the effective age number includes physical, functional, and external, okay? Now I want to quickly flip over to our resource page. Here's our downloads. What we're going to be doing today is talking mostly about explaining adjustments. So if you click that button, you will get a Word document, and I'm going to just go through that Word document with you, but you can have that for later because there's quite a bit of information there. This is from the webinar today. It looks like I got a typo here, and we're going to be talking about explaining cost adjustments, explaining the other adjustments, which is how I refer to the survey-based adjustments. And then we're also going to talk about Advisory Opinion 37, which is about the use of computer-assisted valuation tools like Soliman. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and I'm going to share the document that you can download. So here it is, Webinar Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. Explain your adjustments. Now, just yesterday, I completed my 2021 USPAP course. It was an interesting experience because, first of all, Brian Reynolds was the teacher. He's a friend of mine. He just recovered from COVID. So it was great to see him back in action. And he's very insightful. He's also very entertaining. So if you can ever take a class by Brian, don't miss it. They're offering the same class, I believe, later this week, taught by Josh Wallet, who's also an expert in the field. And the thing I liked about it, it was done on Zoom. You actually registered, you showed your identification, and you proved that you had the books. And then we talked between ourselves. I think there was like 28 or so of us in the class. And it was the best USPAP class I've had. So here's what we found in the student manual. This was kind of interesting. In each USPAP cycle, the foundation surveys state regulators and the certified instructors, and we've got several certified instructors that use Soliman. But they looked at what were the most common misunderstandings, confusion, or non-compliance in USPAP over the last cycle. And that's what they patterned the student manual after. They want to educate people. So the three areas were the number one reason, lack of explanations regarding the subject property, market conditions, adjustments. They're really big on adjustments these days. It wasn't always like that. The second area was lack of support in the report for the reconciliation of the sales comparison approach. So we're going to be looking at those two items as we look through Soliman reporting, okay? So again, let's begin with the end in mind. And to me, that's the bottom of page 2 of the URAR. And this is my reconciliation statement. The sales comparison approach is given most weight because it shows market reaction to similar alternatives. The cost approach is used to show the contributory value of the improvements. So we're not using the cost approach to infer a value of the property. You know, to do that, you would need to know the land value of the cost, and you would somehow need to know the depreciation. I'm turning that around or inside out or upside down and saying, well, no, I think the best use of the cost approach in this case of a single family residence is to start with what we're most comfortable with, what we're most certain of, and then work back to what we don't know. And the thing that we generally don't know is depreciation. But once we know depreciation, it unlocks a whole bunch of possibilities for you in supporting adjustments in the grid. So here it is, starting with the end in mind. The last thing we do on the report is we reconcile the three approaches to value: sales comparison, cost, income, okay? Just above that, we talk about the sales comparison approach. And this was number 2 on the list. People are not doing a very good job of reconciling the the cost or the sales comparison approach. So here's what I start with on a report. It's in my template. And then I edit this as I work through each assignment. But let's take a look at them one at a time. First thing I say is that GLA is reconciled between MLS and assessor data. Now, the reason I do that is because in my market, agents sometimes measure a Cape Cod style differently than an appraiser would, right? We've got the 5-foot rule. So we look at areas that have a minimum of 7 feet headroom. And then we go out to the areas that is at least 5 feet tall, which might only be 10 feet wide, and the maybe 10 by 30, let's say, so a 300-foot finished attic. And the agent says, oh, wait a minute, this is 14 feet wide, so whatever 14 by 30 is, they've got extra GLA counted because they're counting floor space, not GLA, okay? And another one that's really big up here in my market, we have a lot of 4-level split style homes, where if you look at it from the top down, it's a 1,200 square foot footprint, right? And agents will typically say the top level, where the bedrooms and the bathroom is, that's GLA for sure. The second level down from that is where you enter the house, and it's generally a kitchen, family room, living room kind of a thing, maybe a dining room. So you've got those 2 levels that total up to 1,200. Then you walk down 4 steps and you get to the walkout level, okay? It's partially underground. It's a big family room, maybe a half bath or something, maybe a bedroom. But a lot of times agents will include all 1,800 feet in GLA because it's got the same finish as the rest of the house. It's got light. It's got everything you would need, really. But technically, that's part of the basement. And interestingly, on those MLS listings, the agent will say, yes, it has a walkout basement, and yes, it has 1,800 feet. And I want to ask them, which one do you mean? But anyway, that's why I always look at MLS data, especially on a 4-level and a Cape Cod style, a 1.5 story. But I also look at, first of all, the tax assessor data. In my market, we've got a system where there's actually a sketch that's public, so I can see what the assessor is using to base their GLA adjustments on, and usually they're pretty close based on the houses I measure that they have measured. So I just want to alert the user of the report and who may be a review appraiser that my GLA could be different than what the MLS is saying. So that's the first thing I want to get straightened out as I'm reconciling data and using it in my report. The next thing I say, and now here I'm referring to comps X and X, those are the maybe a pending and a listing. These are the market comps. They're the most similar competing properties adjusted for the sales list ratio per the attached MLS charts. So if the MLS data shows that properties are selling for the 100% of the original list price, I would not adjust on the pending comps. And if it's 100% also on the last list price, I guess would be the pending. The original list price would be the actives. So I would just insert the word not. Comps X and X are the most similar competing properties, not adjusted for sales list ratio per the MLS charts. Now, in my market, we have Northstar MLS, and they've got a tool that you may have in your MLS. I'm not sure. I know that it was developed here and sold to many other MLS systems. So check in your MLS and see if you have InfoSparks. It's just a very nice tool for appraisers. And here's how I use it in that second part where I'm trying to show if there's an adjustment for pending or active, okay? I've selected my geography by my zip code. Now I could do that by school district, I could do it by city, I could do it by county, I could even draw around an area on a mapping tool. But I'm starting with all price ranges of zip code 55123. I'm doing a single family house that's previously owned, and it's a traditional sale. So it doesn't include lender mediated foreclosures and so on. Okay, so here it is, March, median percent of last list price. It'll be interesting to see when we get to May or June, right? But as of now, the most recent data shows the market's paying 100% of the last list price, which I would interpret as the pendings. So I would make no adjustment to the pending in the grid. Okay. Now, let's say that I'm appraising a house that's up in the $500 or $500,000 range. So I've selected traditional, previously owned, single family, 467 or more. Now this is the fourth quartile. That's the top fourth of the number of sales are 467 or more. Okay. Here the market is, our sellers are getting 99% of their pending sale of their last list price. So I would adjust 1%. If it was a $500,000 house, I would reduce it by 5,000 to match this data from MLS. All right. And then the date of sale time adjustments. Again, I should say, back up and say, this is an example of sample fit where we want to have an adequate sample size, which we talked about in the earlier webinars. But if we have at least 30 in this category for both this year and last year, then we can fit the sample closer to the subject. Okay. So there it is, 99%. The next part I get into after adjusting the competing properties is the time adjustments. And I say the date of sale time adjustments are developed by applying the X appreciation rate to the interval between the comp contract date, that's the meeting of the minds, and the report effective date, right? So I've got three things going on there. The appreciation rate, in the interval in time between the contract date and the effective date of the report. So on page 1, I've developed this percentage, and I'll show you how I do that in my MLS. Again, using this InfoSparks tool, traditional sale, previously owned, single family, and let's say now I'm down in this price range. I'm appraising a house that's got the best comps are in the low 300 range. So I want to be right here if I have an adequate sample size. And in this category of the market where these buyers are, these are maybe first-time buyers, different than up here where they might be move-up buyers, but the first-time buyers are up 4.2% year over year, right? The median is now 319. It used to be 306. This is an example of paired data, right? We've got, group data. We've got a group of houses that sold this year and a group of houses that sold last year. And if the sample size is adequate, which in my view is over 30, we can look at that and say, well, if the medians are different by 4.2%, the market's up 4.2%. So I would take that and save that as far as how to make a time adjustment. Now let's say if we were just up one price category, now we're looking at a house that might have been 350, 375 or something. Interestingly, this segment of the market has been flat. Look at that, 391 or 392, I should say, 390, 388. So there's very little change. And all I did was I looked at the market that my property was listed in, and I could check both of these if this was a $340,000 house, right? It really includes both ranges. But if it's clearly in this third quartile, I will have a different percentage to use to do the time adjustment. And when it's this small, I would not do one. I don't think a time adjustment's necessary or required or believable, credible if there's such little appreciation. So watch, you've got to know your market, and it's not just geography. It could also be price range of the sold sales, of the comps. So how would I use this information? Well, I would go to the Soliman market time calculator, and there's also one within Sidekick, which is our other program. But what I would do is enter the street address for comp 1, the sale price, the concessions. I would click on this little calendar feature here and go back to the comparable contract date, let's say it was February 1st, 2020, and the appraisal effective date was yesterday, it looks like. Now when I click calculate, the first thing that happens is the calculator subtracts concessions from the sale price because in my market, I think that's the market value. I have never seen concessions on a cash sale, right? We're appraising in terms of cash. You might want to do it differently. There was a time when I would make no adjustment for anything under 3% because that was a common concession threshold, I think, within FHA. But I actually think it's more accurate in my market. Again, you're a different market. I just assume the market value is more like 320. So we've got 320. We've got 80 days. It automatically calculates the distance between those two dates, or the interval between those two dates. And there's this annual rate of appreciation. So the calculation works like this. 80 divided by 365 days in the year gives us a fraction. Here's for 365 days, we're going to have probably less than a fourth of 4.2, more like 1% maybe. And then it multiplies that by this 320. Turns out it's 29.45. So there's the market time adjustment based on a fraction of this appreciation rate, and the fraction is determined by the interval in days between the contract date and the effective date, okay? Now, the calculator, you fill this one out for comp 1, it automatically fills in the appreciation rate for comp 2, comp 3, and comp 4. It automatically fills in the effective date for all of those. So all you need to do is go back and enter the sale price, the concessions, if any. That can be 0, it can leave it blank. And then go back using this calculator or this calendar tool. In this case, it's 1 year ago, right? 4/21/19. So we counted one day twice. There's 366 days. 4.2% of 330 is 13,897, all right? And for this one happened to sell on Christmas Day, which was 118 days ago. So 4.2%, like a third of that roughly, gets me down to 4209 for this $310,000 comp sale price. So these are percentages based on what we've seen in the data for appreciation. And then here on Maple Street, 2724. So that's my next part of the comments on the sales comparison approach, my time adjustments. Supported, something that you can keep in your work file. Okay, the next part, and this is maybe the focus here because we're going to be talking mostly about depreciated cost. All I say is that adjustments for the building characteristics are developed with the depreciated cost method. I don't say Soliman, I say the depreciated cost method. That's been published in the textbooks for years. See page 3, adjustment calculations and the depreciated cost adjustment summary attached. So that's all I say on page 2. And then on page 3, just above the cost approach, I have this in my template, and all I need to do is edit this number, 53, 47, and 47. Adjustments for building cost categories are based on the amount they contribute to value, right? That's what an adjustment is to show a contribution to value. Depreciated replacement cost is the amount that the building contributes to site value, okay? That's appraisal 101. In this particular case, depreciation is 53%. So the market's paying 47% of replacement cost for the buildings. And then see depreciation calculation attached, which includes the 47% factor applied to the relevant cost categories. So that's on page 3, right above the cost approach. And here it is written out in Excel, or excuse me, in Word, so that you can just copy and paste that and use what you want and change what you want, but you don't have to retype off of an image here. Then, of course, you obviously edit the percentages as needed. If it was 50, it would be 50, right? If it was 60, 40, 80, 20, you get the idea. So here's a screenshot of the Soliman adjustment calculator that I used to develop my adjustments. I entered an estimate of market value over here. Before I did that estimate, I had read the contract, I had seen the comparables, I had toured the subject, measured it, taken photos. I'd come back to my office and I'd looked at the interior photos of several comparables, several sales. I wanted to find out which ones are most comparable. And by that time, I was ready to at least develop a hypothesis of the value. And then using that hypothesis, I would go through this process and get the calibrated adjustments. And we've talked about that before. I would try these in the grid to see if they represent a reality. If these numbers returned a different value, I would change it here, and we get a little bit different numbers here. But what this calculator does is it takes your input about the site value, site improvements, and then the GLA, the basement size, and so on. So big, nice big garage on this one, 988, big deck. And it did the cost approach. This is an important number right here, the depreciated cost of improvements, 301. This number doesn't change based on cost. This number changes only based on the market value minus the site value. So that would be 315, right? Minus 14 for the depreciated site improvements, so 301. This has nothing to do with cost. It's all about the market reaction to the property. So the market's paying 301 for the house. The total estimate of cost new is 633, right? So the depreciation has to be the difference, 332. And that 332 is 53% of cost. So the market's paying 47% of cost, right? Economic life is 70 because it's a Q3. Effective age is 37. Effective age, again, that's all we have to do is division there. This depreciation number divided by this total estimate of cost new times 70 years is 37. That's a percentage of 70, okay? And here it is in a little pie chart. As you know, the Soliman calculators take these, I call these default adjustments because they assume that depreciation occurs equally throughout the house. We know that's not always true, so we have these, this calibration feature. So you can say, for instance, that the second fireplace only contributes half because of functional obsolescence, the half bath, the full bath, in the basement finish only contribute half in the basement because of functional, the location and so on. So that's what that's all about, but we're talking about reporting, not how the calculator works. So the next thing I state, and this has to do with the survey data, other adjustments are developed from survey data as a percentage of sale price. Now, what I mean by other adjustments are things like condition. There's no cost involved with condition. We use a survey, or we have used a survey to ask appraisers what they think a difference in condition makes to a house. And I think the data has been, well, it's been working very well for me, as we can see here. I've blocked everything out here that's confidential, but we had a contract price of 410 here, 380, 440, and 431. And after adjustments, 412, 409, 412, right? And all of the adjustments, let's say from here down, these are the depreciated cost adjustments. All these adjustments came straight out of Soliman, depreciated cost. Okay, I rounded to $100. The glaring difference was this C4 to C3. What is the difference in market reaction based on this condition factor? Well, one way to do it is to pair these two houses, right? Before this adjustment was made, or these two, or maybe the average of those two versus this one. But this number, we're crying for an adjustment here. We know C3s are worth more, so we're going to adjust that down, right? Superior, subtract. I remember that from my first appraisal class. If it's superior, we subtract it, I guess. So using pairs, we can see that it's in the 30s somewhere. But we have secondary data, and the reason it's called secondary data is it's there to support other methods. And pairs work well, but when there's so many adjustments already, it gets shakier with each adjustment, right? So we want to back it up with something. So we have survey data that shows 36 is a good number, and that ends up with 412, 409, 412. Now here's an example of the survey, and this is on our website if you're a subscriber. We just keep this, you can look at it. It's under a tab called survey results, and we've got about 20, 25 surveys. But the question we asked, and this is back in August 2018, I think the surveys are good for a while. I don't think there's been any disruptive technological change that makes condition a different, or that makes the market react differently to condition. But for things like condition, I think we can use, and again, this is secondary data. It doesn't relate to the comps used in the report or the comps in the comp pool or the particular market. This is just a robust sample size of appraisers who do this for a living. And when we pool their responses together, we get an answer that's pretty dependable. And that follows something called the wisdom of crowds. You can read more about that and actually watch a video how that works. But it's Sir Francis Galton from 1906. He's the guy that named the variables in regression. He's the guy that named the term median, right? He used to call it the middlemost value. It's the median now, but he used the word median before anybody. So anyway, we had 29 people in the sample, which is very close to what we need. The median response was $15,000. And again, this is for a Q4 $250,000 house with landed value of 25%. The mode, the most frequent response was 25,000, and the mean was 22,179. So following Galton's example, I think the mean is the number that we want to use. I divide the mean, 22,179, by 250 to get this percentage, 8.9%. And that's what I've been using. It seems to work well for me, tested in your reports. Again, secondary data, I wouldn't go do a bunch of adjustments based on the surveys and say that's the value. I would always compare that to other primary methods, and those are depreciated cost, paired data, group data, statistical analysis, and so on. So that's where we got the data. We're doing a $410,000 house. The loan to value is 24, so that's pretty similar. Should I use 8.9 because the survey said 8.9? No. Remember, the survey results are secondary data. Here's comp 4. In this case, I did use 8.9% of 440, and look at that, it came out to 410. So 8.9 has worked really well for me. I would say it's in the 8s somewhere. Sometimes it works at 8.9, sometimes it doesn't. And that's, as an appraiser for, with thousands of appraisals under my belt, when I saw how well this worked, I was amazed. And you may share my amazement if you try it. But it actually, I think there's something to it. I know there's something to it. The point here is that the paired sale technique is the primary method. But because we're doing adjusted pairs, it's weakened because we're not pairing pure comparables, right? They're not differing only in one method or only in one respect. So that's the time when we need to use secondary data to back up our pairing within the grid. And that's what I think is going on, or what I know works in my market anyway, using survey data. And the survey results are not just Minneapolis appraisers, they're appraisers from Florida, Washington, the Northeast, the Southwest, all over the country. And here's again the reference to Sir Francis Galton, Wisdom of Crowds. I say I spelled discovery wrong. Every time I read something, I find another typo. So we're getting close. So I want to just remind you closely, and I want to remind you what we were trying to show from this guidance from the foundation, talking about what the problems were. Lack of explanation regarding adjustments. So we've covered that. We've covered time adjustments. We've covered sales list ratio adjustments to the comps, depreciated cost adjustments, and then what I'll call other adjustments. Those are the ones that are based on the survey data. The other problem that they saw was lack of support in the report for the reconciliation of sales comparison approach. Okay. Now I have done, I think 1,400 appraisals for a company called ValueNet. I stopped a couple years ago when Soliman got busy. But you know, people in general, I'd say appraisals or appraisers had little regard for doing desktop appraisals. And ValueNet is one of the innovators in that realm, and they're doing, at the time, they were doing portfolio analysis. They were doing desktops, desktops, because people wanted to renew their home equity line of credit. So they already knew a lot about the borrower, right? They knew the sales history. They knew they'd been making their payments. They just wanted a quick look-see about what this house might be worth. So I learned a lot working for them, because they've got review appraisers that just drill you when you do something illogical, because really that's what they're selling is logic. So I came up with some terminology that has really helped me. And the idea is that to reconcile the sales comparison approach, I use one of two options. The opinion of value is developed by weighting the adjusted sale prices from least to most adjustments. It's pretty simple. The software I use, which is Total, they've got a system, I'm sure the others do, where they weight the comps according to how much adjusting needed to be done to get them to their adjusted value. The reason I don't follow this, like I'm not a slave to it, it's because no matter what the weighting system is, it is still really just kind of a glorified average. And for some reason, I remember from way back that averaging adjusted comps is a huge no-no. And I think the reason for that is if you add another comp or two on the high end, you'll get a higher average, right? Or if you add a couple more on the small end, you'll get a lower average. So the people that use appraisals don't like the idea of averaging. They want us to think and explain, right? So the second sentence I start with, the opinion of value is developed with most weight on X because Y. And that's flexible. I can say, depending on the grid, right? The opinion of value is developed with most weight on comp 1 because it is most recent. Now, if there's other reasons, you know, I certainly wouldn't. I mean, if I've got 3 comps that are adjusting very close to very tight range and one of them is most recent, that makes a lot of sense. The opinion of value is developed with most weight on comp 1 because it is most similar in location. And you know, when location, like the micro location is very important. Like they might be on the same side of the same lake, okay, and there's very few other lakeshore sales. The opinion of value is developed with most weight on comp 2 because it is the most recent sale on the same busy road as the subject. That's another big one. Again, location. And we've got survey results that shows that a busy road is worth, like, I think it's like 5.7%. Or the opinion of value is developed with most weight on comp 1 because it is the most recent sale with a master bath, like the subject. So maybe we've got a neighborhood built in the 50s and master baths are rare, but now people want master bathrooms, and there's only one comp that has it. And after all the adjusting's done, we get down to similar adjusted values because we can pretty much know what to adjust that for. But still, the one that has it would get the most weight in my mind. It just makes sense. or the opinion of value is developed with most weight on comp 1 because it has most similar updating in the kitchen, right? So it's here's we've adjusted for condition, but this one happened to have the most similar condition based on our viewing of the interior photos. So how do I modify this if I'm doing a drive-by or an exterior with Sidekick? Okay, Sidekick, as you know, and you can see in our previous webinars, is a lightweight version of Soliman. The advantages of Sidekick are that it runs on Excel. You do not need to be an Excel expert, but you need to have Excel running on your machine. So what it does is it loads up, and you can leave it on for hours. You can walk away from your computer, you can leave it there overnight and come back, and all of your work will be there because it's an Excel spreadsheet, right? You can save it like an Excel spreadsheet. You can print it like an Excel spreadsheet. It's very handy, but for me, it's easy to do a spreadsheet. I don't know how to write code. My partner knows how to write code, but it's very expensive and time consuming. So I can write things in Excel and then have them compiled into an exe file, which this is. So it can't be shared between computers, but it's secure. So anyway, Sidekick, it does not have the cost approach. It relies on your estimate of effective age to get the depreciation. It does have the time adjustment feature. It actually has a better way of doing the survey adjustments because I've built those percentages right into a page of the application. So you type in the comp sale price once and it gives you all the adjustments for all the different things, okay? But if it's exterior only, here's what I say on page 3. Adjustments for the building cost categories are based on the amount they contribute to value, right? Depreciation is inferred by the estimate of effective age on page 1, or the depreciation inferred by the estimate of effective age on page 1 is 50%. So the market is paying 50% of replacement costs for the buildings. See depreciation calculation attached, which includes the 50% factor applied to the relevant cost categories. So here we're basing our adjustments, not an opinion of value, but just of the adjustments on an estimate of effective age. Is it valid or credible to estimate effective age? I think it is on a 10-year-old house, especially if you're bracketing on a 20-year-old house, for instance. How about a 70-year-old house? I think by the time a house is 70 years old, it's past the original economic life. If it's still in average or better shape, it's got at least 30 years. So I'm usually at 50-50 for the older houses if they're in good shape. But you've got a feel for that because you're an appraiser. You've been doing effective age estimates for a long time. So it's not as strong as supporting the effective age, I realize. You could use the cost approach within Soliman if you had that to actually run several of the comparables through the cost approach to see what the market is saying about effective age. But I think for the limited scope, I think that's sufficient. It's a huge step in the right direction that we're being consistent in how we handle depreciation and how we recognize that depreciation does affect the grid, right? It's not only a cost approach concept. Now, new in the USPAP document this year, they have a definition of misleading, which seems interesting to me because I think everybody knows what misleading is. But they actually have an entry now. This is new. There's only like 5 or 6 new additions made in the category of definitions. And to be misleading is to intentionally or unintentionally misrepresent, misstate, or conceal relevant facts or conclusions. So unintentionally is kind of scary. We really should have a grip on what we're doing, right? If we're going to sign our name that we're following USPAP, especially nowadays. we have to state that we're not unintentionally misrepresenting. And I think unintentional misrepresentation is pretty common. So you got to know your stuff. Why is this important? And again, it's because the certification we sign says that we've completed the assignment by following USPAP. Now, another part of USPAP, it's not new this year, but we want to talk about it. It's the Advisory Opinion 37, and it's about the use of computer-assisted valuation tools, okay? So here it is. You can read it on your own. You've all got the book. I want to emphasize this part. When using a computer-assisted valuation tool, an appraiser must not simply rely on the output of data programs which claim to give support for adjustments without an understanding of, or that the output is credible. Reliance on this data without understanding the output could place credibility of assignment results in doubt. Now, I think that applies to people who blindly use regression programs, because regression results are not in the same categories as our grid, right? And it's typical for multivariable regression to roll 3 different things into one number. And those 3 things are bath count, bedroom count, and size. And the reason that happens is because, and I know I'm getting technical here, but those are collinear. As houses grow in size, they tend to have more bathrooms, they tend to have more bedrooms. And that's why you might come away with the idea that bedroom adjustments don't count, or it's why you may see multiple variable regression results that say a bathroom is worth minus $10,000, which doesn't make sense. But anyway, we have to understand what's going on in the tool, and hopefully, just by understanding effective age, economic life, and remaining economic life, and understanding some principles of cost, such as average cost and marginal cost. I've got one appraiser that uses Soliman. He does court work up in Colorado, and he said it's much easier explaining cost and depreciation on the stand, on the witness stand, than multivariable regression. So that's a benefit of doing or supporting adjustments, among other ways. But you know, always do always do depreciated cost. It's always relevant no matter what the sample problems are with the MLS data. If it's not the best way in your particular case, at least it's a way that you can reconcile. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to point out. Excuse me. The second thing, don't you wake up in the morning and say, wow, I'm sure glad I don't have a headache. I must not have it. I must not have the virus. Anyway, illustrations here. This is another big one. Standard Rule 1-4B-II requires that the appraiser analyze such comparable cost data, and that's what we're basing stuff on, right, is cost, as are available to estimate the cost of improvements. Therefore, the appraiser should not simply accept one cost calculation or another without careful analysis. And that's why we have a tool built in to Soliman in our Soliman Cost New program. And I'll show you that at the end here if we have time. But you can see what percentage of the cost manual the builder is operating at, and presumably at a profit, right? Builders don't use cost manuals to build houses. The cost data is actually market data of builders and permits and so on, permit fees. But those are, any survey result is a bell curve, right? The middle of the curve is not the cost of every house that was built, right? It's a sample that has all the same characteristics of every other sample. So we've got a tool to help you see what a particular builder, a particular project, how that compares to the cost data. So we do give you a way to reconcile those two to keep you in compliance on numbers 179 through 181 right here. So we're getting, again, close to the end. Soliman and Sidekick are analytical tools. do not state in your report that adjustments are developed with a Soliman adjustment calculator. Nobody says I calculated GLA with total sketch, or how did you get this answer? I used my HP10, right? They want you to know, they want to know which buttons you pressed when and why, right? So Soliman includes depreciated cost analysis and market extraction tools. Speak in those terms. So the adjustments were done with depreciated cost analysis. The site value was done by market extraction, okay? Depreciated cost is not exclusive to Soliman. I never heard of it before I started working on this, but it's out there. I mean, I think I connected some dots that hadn't been looked at for a while. I'll take credit for that, at least in my own brain. But now depreciated cost is kind of gaining some momentum. I think people are talking about it, and it's showing up in the newest textbooks. So if you've ever wondered if depreciated cost is legit, here's a new book, Residential Real Estate Appraisal. The Appraisal Institute published it. These are credible people. Mark Ratterman's been around for years. He's a very bright guy. I've been fortunate to have one of his classes live many years ago, so I can actually picture him teaching. But here's an example from page 372 in his book. Hold on a second. I'm getting hoarse. So, garage and car storage. Adjustments for garages and car storage are common in nearly all regions, but may not be needed in some urban markets. These features are commonly adjusted for based on depreciated cost. And then he gives an example, and it's exactly what we're talking about. A two-car garage, 500 feet, it's $30 per foot new, so it's $15,000. It's got a certain amount of depreciation. He's doing this a little bit differently, but 10% depreciation. But the net value here is that it's $8,100 for that third garage stall, and it's done with depreciated cost. And he talks about something here that we've talked about, but the difference in value of a detached garage could be lower than an attached garage. We actually did a survey, and it was like less than 1%. But the detached garage would probably cost more, all things being equal, but the market pays no more just because it costs more, right? We're looking at depreciated cost, which includes functional as well as other forms of depreciation. So anyway, that's it for this handout. You can download that and use it if you would like to structure the way that you explain depreciated cost on your assignments. Now, Kyle, do we have questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions. The first one going back towards the beginning, and I missed exactly which figure this was, but they were asking, where did you get the 4.2%?
Okay. Yes, I use, this is paired data, or excuse me, group data. I use a tool in my MLS. This is actually something that you could do with a search, right? You could search all the houses. You have a search criteria for your geography this year, and then do the same search last year. And if the difference happened to be 4.2%, that's the number. If this is a big enough sample, right? If it's over 30 houses this year and 30 houses last year, that's where I got that percentage. It's group data. It's one of the accepted techniques. So you look at a group of sales this year, the same parameter search last year, and then you've got that percentage.
Okay, next question. How do you support the adjustments for condo improvements?
Condo improvements. We have attempted to do some surveys because condos, of course, don't really fit the cost approach too well, right? We don't do the cost approach on condos. A lot of the cost of a condo is common walls and floors and ceilings and structure and hallways and so on. So I would say depreciated cost is not valuable with condos. You know, you could argue that the same buyers place the same value on a bathroom, whether it's a house or a condo. I don't know. I would not hang my hat on that. To me, a condo is a very good place to find pairs, and just use pairs for condos. There's generally, you know, in a big condo building, there might be 100 units. You can go back 2 or 3 years and find pairs, and be well on your way without using depreciated cost, which really doesn't apply.
Okay, next question. What's the process for estimating effective age? Can you go through that process, or the thought
Okay.
process?
Yes, it's the way you've always done it, right? We on page 1 of the 1004, it asks us a question. What's the effective age estimate? If you look at the definitions in the textbooks, it refers to it as an estimate. Now, I've heard or read people, you know, respected authors that say, well, it's when you walk in the house and when you look at the outside of the house, how old does the house appear to be? If it appears to be, like a 10-year-old house, it doesn't matter how much the chronological age is, that's the effective age. So I don't think it's as strong as using the cost approach to kind of calculate effective age, but it does give us some leeway within the literature, you know, estimate effective age. So if it's a 10-year-old house in average condition, I would start with 10, whatever sounds reasonable.
Next question. Do you have a comment summarizing adjustment calculations?
Well, yeah, I just say that I use the depreciated cost method, and I give them 3 different examples. Well, let's see, where do we start here? Okay, here's my summary of sales comparison approach. GLA is reconciled between MLS and assessor data. Here's the percentage adjustments for the market comps. Here's the market time comps. Adjustments for building characteristics are developed with depreciated cost method, period. See page 3, adjustment calculations, and the depreciated cost adjustment summary attached. That's all I say about it. And now when they go to page 3, they'll see, where was that? Scroll. This is right above, I put this at the bottom of page 3, right above the cost approach. So when they look down at the cost approach, they'll see that depreciation is 53%. So the market's paying 40% for the building, 47% for the buildings. And I just tell them that's what I'm doing. The contribution of the building is 47% of replacement cost. And then I also refer them to a page in the report. I just take a screenshot of this and put it in the report as a page that says, I think I labeled this depreciated cost calculations. So I give them a screenshot of this, and they can see my adjustments. And they look at the grid, and what do you know? There they are. So it doesn't show each individual adjustment. I mean, you can do that within Soliman. You could go and show somebody that, well, let's see, the marginal cost of GLA is $90. So after this much depreciation, it's 67. You know, you could go into that, but it's never been asked. You should understand it, but you can understand that by reading the user manual and playing with the calculators. We've got a free trial. Speaking of using the calculators, if you write this word down, be safe, B-E-S-A-F-E, that's make 2 words into 1 word, but be safe. That's a coupon code you can use if you order Sidekick this month. So you've got a few more days, another week. You'll get $50 off. So instead of $100, you would pay $50. And Sidekick, again, you need Excel to run it. It starts off at the beginning of the year. It's worth $100. So I'm going to do some math here. So 100 divided by 365, it costs 27 cents a day. Some of those days are gone. There's only a couple hundred days left this year, but it's on sale. Anyway, it's below the cost of 27 cents a day if you use that Be Safe code, but you do need Excel to run it. You don't need to be an Excel expert. You can actually download the manual there, the user manual, and I call that a crash course in depreciated cost because it will explain how you got the adjustments. And in our prior videos too, there's plenty of help on the website with, in fact, let me stop sharing that and I'll just go back to the website. Share screen. Okay, here's where you can download the Sidekick user manual, and that will explain the methods beyond what an underwriter would need you to explain. Okay, you can also take advantage of our free 14-day trial and get a hold of the the Soliman user manual. That's longer. It's like 30-some pages, but it shows what we're doing. In a sense, we're extracting marginal cost from average cost data. Marginal cost is the cost of one more foot, okay? And we're using that same cost data to see what percentage of cost is being paid in the market. And to do that, you need to estimate something sooner or later, maybe site value, maybe market value, but then you can test it. It's the scientific method where you make an assumption, you develop a hypothesis, and then you test the hypothesis. More?
Last question at the moment is, where did the adjustments for the site area of $1,100 come from in the example?
Okay, that'll be a topic for next week. That's a site improvement or a site size adjustment. What I like to do with that, just briefly, is adjust what I do have support for, and then look at the grid and see what's left to adjust. And that was a pretty small adjustment per square foot. But if we do this again next week, what I want to show you is something I call very simple regression, where you input the adjusted sale prices into a table along with the lot sizes, and you press a button and it'll show you a regression line with that adjustment. We've also had a couple surveys where we ask people, what does it add to a suburban lot? What does it add to a city lot for a certain amount of land size? But I do it after the rest because, as everybody knows, it's not just the size of the site that matters. It's the location. It's the shape of the lot. It's what's behind the lot, what's next to the lot, and so on. But that's for a different time.
And that's all we have.
Okay. Well, we just passed the 1 hour mark, so I think I'll wrap it up here. But before I do, I just want to invite you to get a hold of me if you want to talk through this one-on-one. I love talking to appraisers. I'm learning how to share my screen. My email is scullen2@comcast.net, and you can find that on the website and so on. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and maybe we'll see each other again soon.